David Sutter from laramie.youtube with you. It is glad to have you along, and I'm very, very honored and humbled to be joined in studio by the Colonel of the Wyoming Highway Patrol, Kebin Holler, as well as Trooper Rick Colling from the Laramie area. And guys, I appreciate you coming in as we talk a little bit about road safety. And I'm going to begin with you, Colonel Holler. Thank you so much for coming over and spending some time with me. This has been one of those situations where it's been an active winter season so far, and I got to say 2019 has not started off, I think, the way you guys would hope for in terms of the number of fatalities we've already had here up through mid-June.
Good morning, David. Thank you for having us in. You are correct. We are very concerned and alarmed by the number of fatalities that we've had. There have been some harsh spring weather conditions that have certainly contributed to that. But we are taking a look at our numbers statewide and kind of identifying where we can focus our efforts.
As you look back at everything that has gone on, and doing my morning show up, you know, from the first year through, and even thinking back to November, December, and then through the end of May, there was a lot of times where I saw reports of driving too fast for the conditions. What can we do about, I guess, addressing that with folks in the listening audience that are, you know, saying, hey, I know how to drive in these conditions, I know how to handle my vehicle, but we see, I guess, maybe too much of that.
Yes, sir. I agree. And in fact, many times our troopers are seeing too fast for conditions, speed directly related, oftentimes in combination with other unsafe driving behavior. But having said that, some measures that you can always take is to plan ahead. Oftentimes we see drivers that are attempting to make up time on the road, so to speak, because they have not planned ahead and allowed themselves enough time. Whenever a driver does this, it is making the decision to speed, and in fact, it's not only putting themselves in danger, but everyone else around them as well.
How concerning is that for you guys right now, in terms of just, you know, I guess what you're seeing in terms of some of these accidents, in terms of some of the reports that you're getting from troopers across the state? Where's your concern level at?
So our concern level, obviously, we're out on the interstates and highways throughout the state. So we're already talking about highway and interstate speeds. With that, anytime you are going to have a crash, at those speeds, you're going to see some extreme tragedy. And with that, whenever an individual is not buckled up, we're also seeing impairment is at 1/3 of our numbers right now. Seatbelts, as I mentioned, are a huge concern, particularly with Wyoming citizens themselves.
I saw an interesting poll out. I think it was actually done by our news reporter, one of them out of our Cheyenne office, that talked about seatbelt laws in Wyoming and should there be more enforcement of it? You know, because right now I believe, and you can clarify this, that you guys can only write a ticket for a seatbelt violation if you stop the driver or vehicle for some other violation. I think that's correct. But we put out the poll of, should there be a way for troopers to stop, or law enforcement in general just to stop for seatbelt use violation? You know, and it was kind of a mixed bag between, some people said yes, some people said no, but a lot of people, and I'll be surprised, Colonel Holler, that it came back to the fact that it was one of those where most people are like, well, I can make my own decision. And these numbers, I guess, are kind of striking against that, at least from my perspective as a person in the industry that has tried to stress to the audience on a morning show, travel safely wherever you're going.
So yes, sir. What we're talking about is secondary and primary seatbelt laws. You are correct. In the state, currently, our law is secondary seatbelts. So in saying that, our troopers must see another violation outside of that seatbelt violation to initiate contact with the driver of that vehicle. On the other side, with the primary seatbelt law, would be the opposite. It would be the seatbelt in and of itself would be considered a violation and a reasonable suspicion for the trooper or law enforcement to have contact with that vehicle. Just to kind of put this into perspective, David, we have had, just in the month of May of this year, we had 12 fatalities. Of those 12, 7 were not buckled up. So, but what's really interesting is 6 of that 7 are our own citizens, people that live here in our state which we consistently see by a large majority of individuals that make the conscious decision to not buckle up.
That's troubling to me. I can only imagine what that is for you and your guys around the state, just what they're seeing. Now, I know across southeast Wyoming, we might see things a little, I guess, more harshly in terms of the road and travel conditions because of the mountains. And I think we all realize that between Cheyenne and Rollins, that 150-mile stretch of I-80, one of the most closed roads, if not the most closed road in the entire country. I want to bring in one of your guys here, Rick Colling, in just a moment, to talk a little bit about just what you've seen, Rick, here during this winter and spring season to kind of back up what Colonel Haller and I are talking about.
Right. Well, you know, we're seeing the gamut of driving violations, obviously, out there. As the Colonel pointed out, we constantly are seeing a lot of these crashes that people, they're just hurrying too much to get somewhere. Their priorities are on getting there, not necessarily how they get there. With the higher speed limits, particularly on our secondary roads such as US 287, is kind of an interesting subject for us because those speeds raised up to 70 miles per hour. But what we consistently see is no matter what the speed limit is, I shouldn't say most people, but too many people are basically thinking that, well, that means that they can go 10 miles an hour faster than that. But what we're really finding interesting out there these days is that we're stopping a high number of people that are running triple digits. In other words, they're doing 100 miles an hour or more on those roads. And it seems to be a dramatic increase to me from when we were at 65 miles per hour. And particularly on US 287, where a lot of that road was turned into a 4-lane situation to decrease the likelihood of head-on collisions. And that particular region is where we're really seeing those triple-digit numbers. You know, we've always dealt with the impaired driving, and I don't see a market change in that. But what I do see a market change in is in distracted driving out there. And we know from our stops, from crashes and so forth, that a lot of that is related to how people are utilizing cell phones these days, quite frankly. I mean, we already had all the common distractions where people were eating in the car or distracted by a passenger, something of that nature. But the cell phone era has really changed the game. And I think what's particularly troublesome to me is that now you, as the other party involved in a crash or just being on the road, it may be that you're behaving and putting your cell phone down and not paying attention to it, but you really have to focus on the roadway, and more almost like motorcycle folks do. You know, motorcycles, they kind of drive like everybody's trying to kill them. And now I think no matter whether you're in a motorcycle or a passenger car, you have to be cognizant of the fact that a great number of people out there are using these devices, and unintentionally you may become the victim of what's going on with those folks.
So I asked you, Trooper Colling, this is Trooper Rick Colling from the Laramie area, as you patrol across southeast Wyoming, what are ways that we can reduce that? I mean, what is the best way, I guess, that you guys are talking amongst yourselves on the force about?
Correct. I think the number one thing that we need to be focusing on, and that's one reason we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about this entire subject, is we've got to focus on education, because we can go out and be as proactive as we possibly can, making a lot of traffic stops, trying to intercede. I cannot say enough about the public contributing through calling in when they see driving behavior that's dangerous. It results in a lot of our impaired driving arrests. It helps us catch those people that are falling asleep at the wheel and wake them up and take action. But at the end of the day, law enforcement has a tendency by its very nature to be more on a reactionary basis. No matter how proactive we try to be, we're reacting to somebody's already doing something wrong.
Okay.
So I think that education is our number one advantage to getting to people to realize that these behaviors lead to serious and deadly consequences. we're enacting all kinds of programs, and I know that you discussed with us a while back freshman impact that we're bringing to Laramie. The colonel took a look at this program that was initiated in South Dakota, and they're seeing such positive results out of this freshman impact, which is basically a program designed to educate freshmen in high school on the dangers that they face out there in driving. And I think it's just a good example of programs that we're trying to do, such as Alive at 25, where we're trying to send out positive messages to the public of how can we avoid doing this, why is it so dangerous,
Right.
and then they're not doing it in the first place. So I think those are our two major areas that we do. We do a lot of overtime enforcement out there, where the troops go out beyond their shift and they work specifically speed and impaired enforcement time. And I think that programs like that are also quite helpful.
Well, and let's hope that it kind of, I guess, increases the public's awareness of issues, but also I like the education piece. I do remember talking with you and Rick McPherson, who came down from South Dakota and kind of got the wheels rolling for that. Looking forward to that coming up in September of this year. Back to you, Colonel Haller, and the reason why I want to go back to you real quick in this regard is the fact that what's your take on the way your guys are going out and trying to educate? Yes, there's enforcement, but more so educate nowadays.
Yeah, that is correct. We are continually trying to have the balance between education and enforcement, and I agree wholeheartedly with Trooper Colling. Our education efforts, I believe, have improved, but we can't let up, especially during these trying times. So we will continue with all of the education, but the reality is we're also law enforcement, and as Trooper Colling relayed, oftentimes we are a response in nature to a criminal act that has already been occurred or being conducted. So we'll react accordingly with that. I've been relaying the message across the state that if in fact you are stopped by one of my troopers, you can expect a citation. We need to look at the issue that is looking us right in the face, and that is the high fatality numbers. We're at 69 today. Excuse me. Yes, we are 69 today. As of 2017, we were at 40, and in 2018, just last year, we were at 39. So at one point this year, we were more than double.
Right.
Now we're just a little below double. But recognizing that one fatality is one too many, and it changes lives forever.
It really does. And you know, hosting the morning show I did in Laramie, folks, it was one of those situations where I always had the message of, hey, I might not know everybody, but no matter what it is, I want you to get to your destination safe and sound, because sitting here talking about fatalities is not something that even those of us in the news media like to do. I mean, just conversations with news folks in my company, it's not a fun time when you sit here and talk about fatalities, and it can't be fun to have your guys talk to you about them nor go out and cover them.
No, sir, this is not a pleasant topic, and again, back to the education side. We would much rather be in a position to prevent a tragedy than respond to a tragedy. But unfortunately, all too often, in fact, 69 incidents so far this year, our troopers have responded to these tragic scenes. And I can assure you, nobody carries that burden more than our troopers.
So what is the conversation like between you and every other guy and kind of, I think you have them broken down into different districts around the state. What is the conversation like right now between everybody on your force right now across the Cowboy State?
It is one of alarm and concern. Our troopers out there that are responding to these, enforcing traffic laws, talking to people both from in-state and passing through our state, are very passionate. And this we take personal. Whenever we see our fatality rate almost double, and because of that concerted effort and the passion, that's where we go back into and we focus. We focus on the education component, which again, thank you for having us. But we also focus on where can we have an impact, and that's out on the roadways, talking with violators, and like I said, sometimes that may end up in a citation itself.
What are the next steps then here going forward to maybe try and make 2019 a better year to end versus the way it's began in your mind?
So with the enforcement, our troopers continue to do everything they can. We will continue to hit this head on, so to speak. With that, on the education side, I do believe that we do need to have discussion with our legislature about a primary seatbelt law.
Okay.
And so I am actively involved in that. Whenever asked, where, such as your question, where do we need to focus our efforts? So those conversations are taking place. With that, I'm also hearing and talking to our troopers around the state that whenever a citation is issued for a traffic violation, unfortunately, oftentimes the response is that all? And so a citation is meant to deter future negative behaviors, such as speeding, say.
Right.
So it doesn't it doesn't make me feel confident in that we're having that desired effect. And so we are having conversations surrounding that. These are both individuals from within our state and passing through our state.
Right.
And so clearly our bond amounts, the fines, are not at a level to where we have the confidence that in fact we are changing that behavior.
So maybe something to raise as more of a deterrent?
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
That is correct. I mean, that's ultimately why laws are in place. With that, as Trooper Colling indicated, a vast majority of our fatalities this year are a combination of factors, but one that continues to stand out is distracted driving. And there's evidence at many of these scenes. One of the main ones is failure to maintain lane of traffic. And so it is not uncommon for a trooper to arrive on scene and see evidence from the vehicle, yaw marks and other indicators that the vehicle drifted over the driving lane, and then from there overcorrects, and there is a rollover. And it is with absolute certainty that if you are not buckled in during one of these rollovers, that you will be ejected and therefore will die. In short, we investigate 6,500 crashes a year.
Wow.
And there are many times that individuals survive these rollovers because they are buckled in. On the other side of the road, people are not maintaining lane of traffic and they're veering over to the left. You're on a primary secondary highway, that will end up in a head-on. And we are responding to a number of these multi-vehicle head-on crashes. Now, our commercial motor vehicles crashes are also more than double at this point in time. So, so we're seeing a combination. There's also evidence to suggest that distracted driving is a component of commercial vehicle crashes as well. Now, we all recognize that if you're hitting a passenger vehicle is heading on into a commercial vehicle, it's not going to end well.
No.
Seatbelts still play a role in the safety. But having said that, we're talking about highway speeds. So we're trying to look at this holistically, so we can relay the information back to the public. Put down your device. It is not worth it. Things change in a second, and then you react, and oftentimes that's an overreaction, creating a head-on and/or a rollover.
Well, and it's one of those where I don't think people realize how far you can travel, especially at high rates of speed, whether it's 65, 70, 75, 80, how far you can go just by looking down and trying to read a 5-second text. It can take you a long ways. And I think that's part of that distracted element you guys are talking about.
Yes, sir, it is. There's a saying, and it's within the patrol and other law enforcement, that is speed kills. And that is absolutely true. The higher rate of speed that you're going, and if you're involved in a crash, the less likelihood you have to survive that crash with each mile an hour above the speed limit.